I never planned on cheating. That's what most guys say, right? But it's the truth. It wasn't some long game or secret fantasy. It just happened. And that's the part one hate the most. How easy it was to cross a line I swore I'd never touch. Her name was Olivia. She worked in accounting. Young, smart, had that dry kind of sarcasm that made meetings bearable. I'm 38, married, 2 kids, small house in Indiana. Olivia was 27.
No baggy. No bedtime routines.
No responsibility. It started with coffee, turned into long lunches. Then one night, after a work happy hour, I drove her home. She kissed me in the parking lot. I didn't stop it. I kissed her back. We didn't sleep together that night. Not yet. But that kiss opened the door. And once it was open, I walked straight through. It lasted almost 8 months. Hotels during conferences. Texts on a burner phone I kept in my truck. I had rules, stupid ones. Never bring her to our town. Never talk about my kids. Never stay overnight. I told myself I had it under control. That I still loved my wife. That I was just blowing off steam. That this was temporary. Then she found out. My wife, Amy, saw a text. Not even a bad one. Just a miss you today red heart. Left open on my work laptop when I ran to grab a towel. I came back to her holding the screen like it was radioactive. Her face was calm, scarily calm. You want to explain this? She asked. I didn't lie. For the first time in a long time, I didn't lie. I told her everything. Every ugly detail. And when it was over, she walked into the bathroom, threw up, then came out and said, "You need to leave." And I did. For a month. I spent that month in a cheap hotel off I-69. It smelled like old coffee and dust. Every night I'd fall asleep with the TV on just to drown out the silence. I tried calling Amy twice. No answer. Left one voicemail. Deleted the second before sending it. I saw the kids once at a park. She let me sit on a bench across from them. I waved. My daughter waved back. My son didn't. That hurt more than anything. I stopped seeing Olivia. Cold. Immediate.
No explanations.
She messaged a few times. You okay? Do you hate me? I didn't respond. Because what could I say? Sorry. I ruined your life too? Eventually, Amy agreed to see me. Not to get back together. Just to talk. We sat in her sister's backyard. Awkward like strangers at a funeral. I need to ask you something, she said. Why did you do it? I wanted to say something smart. Something that made me sound broken, but fixable. But all I said was, I don't know. She nodded slowly. That's the worst part. Then she told me she didn't want to raise the kids in hate. That if I wanted to come back, it wouldn't be easy. That there'd be rules. Counseling. Full honesty. No second chances. I said yes to all of it. Every condition. Because I still loved her. Still loved our kids. Still wanted to be better. But deep down, I knew I hadn't told her everything. I told her I ended it with Olivia. I hadn't told her I'd already seen her again. Only once. A week before that conversation. Olivia had shown up at the hotel. Cried. Said she missed me. Said she didn't blame me. And I, weak, ashamed, and lonely, let her in. We didn't sleep together. But she stayed the night. I never told Amy. I convinced myself it didn't count. But that moment was the beginning of the end. Coming back home felt like walking into a museum of my own mistakes. Everything was where I left it. Same couch. Same dent in the wall near the bathroom door. Same calendar with birthdays and school events written in Amy's soft handwriting. But nothing felt the same. The kids were distant at first. My daughter hugged me too fast. Like she wasn't sure if it was okay. My son didn't make eye contact for the first week. And Amy, she was polite, focused, efficient. We talked logistics, groceries, carpool schedules. But we didn't talk us. Therapy started the second week I was back. Every Tuesday, 6 p.m., a marriage counselor's office with too many inspirational posters. Amy was open, honest, brutally so. I tried to be too. But there was always this one wall I couldn't break down. Because behind all the effort, the changed passwords, the location sharing, the daily check-ins, I was still hiding something. I never told her about the night Olivia came to the motel. I told myself it wasn't sex, that it didn't matter. But every time Amy reached for my hand in those therapy sessions, I felt like a thief being shown kindness. Still, for a while, things got better. The kids smiled more. Amy laughed once, really laughed, at something I said while we were cooking dinner. I remember freezing in place, afraid to move and ruin the moment. There were nights she fell asleep next to me again.
No intimacy.
Just warmth. And it felt like redemption. But redemption only works if you've told the whole truth. And I hadn't. It started with a phone call I didn't answer. Blocked number. One ring. Then nothing. Could have been a scam. Could have been anything. But I knew who it was. I hadn't heard from Olivia in months. Not since the night she stayed at the motel.
No texts. No social media.
She disappeared from my life like a ghost I thought I'd finally buried. But that call, that one ring, cracked something open. I started checking my phone more often. Got jumpy when Amy walked into the room while I was scrolling. Deleted call logs that didn't even contain her name, just in case. I told myself she wasn't a threat, that she was gone, that I was being paranoid. But the truth is, I wanted to hear from her, even if I hated that part of myself. A week later, I saw her. I was grabbing lunch near the job site, some little sandwich shop downtown. I looked up, and there she was across the street. She saw me too, froze, then walked away fast, disappearing into the crowd. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. But my stomach flipped anyway. That night, Amy made pasta. The kids were telling a story about something funny at school. I was nodding, smiling, chewing, and thinking about the back of a woman's head disappearing down a sidewalk. That's when I knew I never really closed that door. I just pulled it almost shut and hoped nobody would look through the crack. And the worst part? Amy trusted me again. She had no idea I was still glancing over my shoulder, still haunted by a ghost I let back in for one night. I wasn't cheating anymore, but I wasn't free either. And that kind of limbo, it doesn't last. Something was coming. I could feel it. The message came in at 11:47 p.m. I was half asleep, the bedroom dark except for the soft blue glow of Amy's phone charging on the nightstand. Mine lit up for a second, then went still. I should have ignored it. I should have rolled over, held my wife like I hadn't in weeks, and gone back to sleep. Instead, I got up, quietly, like a thief in my own house. The message was from a new number, but I recognized the rhythm of the words.
I'm pregnant.
2 words. That's all it took to punch a hole straight through the little piece I'd been pretending to build. I didn't move for a full minute. I just sat on the toilet lid, phone in hand, heartbeat thudding in my ears like it was trying to warn me. Don't answer. Don't open this door again. But the door was already open. It had been cracked this whole time. I typed, "Is it mine?" Backspace. Too cold. "Are you sure?" Backspace. Then I just closed the screen and set the phone face down on the counter. Amy stirred when I got back in bed. I held still, afraid even my breathing would sound guilty. She rolled over and draped her arm across my chest. It should have comforted me. Felt like a noose. The next morning I made waffles for the kids. They fought over syrup. Amy smiled at me across the kitchen like we were finally getting somewhere again. And all I could think was, how do I tell her I just got someone else pregnant? I didn't. Of course I didn't. I went to work. I nodded in meetings. I took lunch in my truck and stared at trees like they might tell me what the hell to do. Later that day, she messaged again. "Olivia, it's yours. You were the only one." I felt sick. Not panic, something slower, colder. Like grief for a future I'd just set on fire. And the worst part? Piece of me liked hearing from her. Not because I wanted to be with her. Because I didn't want to disappear. Because deep down, I was scared that if this child was real, then part of me might finally matter to someone again. Even if it was through the worst possible choice. That night, Amy curled up next to me and whispered, "You've been good lately. Thank you for not giving up on us." I couldn't answer, because Olivia had just sent me a photo. An ultrasound. Tiny limbs, a fragile shape, a life, proof, and I realized this wasn't a threat from the past. This was a timeline I couldn't erase. I started checking over my shoulder. Not in the literal sense, not yet. But emotionally, every smile Amy gave me felt just a second too soft. Every pause in her sentence made me wonder what she wasn't saying. I found myself watching her, the way she used to watch me when I was the one being suspicious. We'd been doing better, at least on the surface. Therapy, dinners together, occasional walks after the kids went to bed. We even had a weekend getaway planned for next month, our reconnection trip, as the counselor called it. But Olivia's messages were growing. First the ultrasound, then appointment updates, then, I don't want anything from you. I just thought you should know. Bullshit. She didn't want silence. She wanted presence. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted me in the story. And that's the thing, I wanted to believe she was the problem. That Olivia was trying to ruin the fragile thing I was rebuilding. But she wasn't. She was just being honest. I was the one still pretending. Amy started looking at me differently again. Little things, not dramatic. But they built up. One day she asked if I was okay. I said just tired. And she nodded too slowly. Another time, I left my phone on the counter and caught her glancing at the lock screen like it had something to say. She didn't accuse me. She didn't snoop. She didn't cry. She smiled. But it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile you give someone right before you ask them to leave. And suddenly, I was back in that place again. In the shadows, playing defense, flinching at kindness because I knew I didn't deserve it. The secret had weight, and it started to leak into everything. I was more impatient with the kids, distracted during dinner. I forgot our son's soccer game because I was sitting in my car reading a message from Olivia that said, "It's a girl." I dropped the phone when I read that. Like it bit me. I sat there for 10 minutes. Couldn't breathe. Because I have a daughter. A little girl who still runs to me when I walk in the door. And now there's another one. Growing somewhere else who may never call me dad. Or worse, who might. And I'm lying to both of them. To all of them. That night, Amy brought me tea. Said, "You've been distant again." I nodded. "Work stress." She smiled. And for the first time in weeks, I saw it. She didn't believe me. I didn't find out she knew. I felt it. It was the way Amy stopped asking follow-up questions. The way she'd pause mid-conversation, like waiting for me to say something I never did. The way she held my gaze too long, as if daring me to flinch. It was a Tuesday morning. She was getting the kids ready for school. I was making coffee, scrolling aimlessly. She looked at me from across the room. No smile, no words, just a stare. Not angry, not curious, flat. And it hit me. She wasn't wondering anymore. She wasn't suspicious. She knew. I sat down on the edge of the bed that night, phone in hand. Olivia had sent another message. "No pressure. Just tell me if you want to be involved. I won't chase you." I didn't answer. Amy walked into the room, tossed a towel into the hamper, and asked, "Want tea?" "Sure." She made it, sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us had weight now, texture, like a third person sitting in the room. A version of me that had already confessed, already destroyed everything, already been told to leave. But instead of speaking, I kissed her forehead and said, "Thanks for the tea." She nodded. No expression. The next day, she moved her pillow slightly farther from mine. That weekend, she went to her sister's, just for the night. She didn't text when she arrived. The day after that, she didn't kiss me goodbye before work. These things seem small, almost meaningless. But when you've shared a bed with someone for over a decade, you start to understand the language beneath words. You feel the withdrawal before it even begins. And by Thursday, I started packing a bag. Not because she told me to, because I knew it was coming. And I wanted to be ready, not for the end, for the moment before it ends. It was a quiet Sunday. The kind of day that used to mean pancakes, cartoons, maybe a slow walk around the block. But that morning, the house felt like a museum.
No laughter. No smells.
Just doors opening and closing, feet shuffling, voices kept low. Amy didn't speak to me once before noon. She moved around me like I was furniture, sat across the table, scrolled on her phone, responded to the kids, but never looked up. And I knew then today was it. I packed a duffel bag that afternoon. Nothing dramatic. Just some clothes, toiletries, the charger she hates that I always forget. I placed it in the closet where she could see it. I wanted her to know I wasn't going to make this harder. Not again. That night, the kids went to bed early. Too early. Like they'd been prepped for something. Like she told them softly, "Daddy might not be here in the morning." She came downstairs with her hair pulled back. No makeup. Sweatshirt. Barefoot. She sat on the couch and didn't invite me to join her. But I did anyway. One cushion over. We sat in silence for almost 5 minutes.
No te ve.
No background noise. Just the clock ticking. Finally, she spoke. "I know." I didn't ask what she meant. She turned her head slightly. "She's pregnant, right?" There it was. Out loud. Cold. Unflinching. I nodded. She exhaled. Not shocked. Not devastated. Just confirmation. Then she said the words I'll hear for the rest of my life. "You had a chance to rebuild with me, and you brought a wrecking ball." I opened my mouth. Closed it. Nothing I could say would change anything. I wasn't there to fix it. I was there to witness it fall apart. Properly. "I'm not going to scream," she said. "Not going to cry. I already did that months ago. You just weren't around to see it." I nodded again. "You should go before the kids wake up." And just like that, she stood. Walked upstairs. Didn't look back. I sat for another 5 minutes, listening to the stairs creak above me. Then I grabbed the bag. Walked out. Closed the door. And this time, I knew I wouldn't be coming back. The house felt empty long before I walked out that final day. Now, in the wake of that storm, I found myself living in a sparse, cold apartment on the outskirts of town. Every room echoed with memories of a life I'd shattered, and every object was a reminder of promises I'd broken. I spent my days moving through routine motions, waking up with a heavy heart, making coffee that tasted like regret, and staring at the blank walls, hoping that one day, the weight would lift. I tried to reach out to Amy, to say something that might mend the fragments left behind, but the silence on the other end of the phone only deepened my despair. My children were caught in the crossfire of a war they never signed up for, their innocent smiles slowly fading as they grew accustomed to an absence that was always there. I'd catch fleeting glances of my daughter's eyes when she thought I wasn't watching, or hear my son's whispered, "Daddy?" in the quiet of the night, and each time, it cut me deeper. There were days when I found myself driving aimlessly, the road stretching out like an endless confession. I remembered the nights when Olivia's messages would flash on my screen, stirring a twisted sense of longing mixed with guilt. I had clung to those moments, desperate for any sign that I still mattered, even if it was through a lie. But now, as I tried to rebuild what little remained, the past loomed like a specter that refused to be exorcised. In therapy sessions that felt more like interrogations than healing, I was forced to confront every decision, every reckless moment that led to this unraveling. I listened as the counselor recounted my life in a series of fractured snapshots. A cheating husband, a man too weak to choose one life, a father haunted by the future he had created. The mirror in that sterile office showed a face I barely recognized. Hollow eyes, a permanent crease of regret, and a soul that had surrendered long ago. That night, as rain pounded against the window pane of my new apartment, I sat by a single lamp, writing in a journal I no longer believed in. I scribbled apologies that could never be delivered, and questions that would never be answered. What did I hope to find in those stolen moments? Who was I trying to become? The pages filled with raw, unfiltered truth. Truth that I was too scared to face in daylight. In that darkness, I was left with only the echo of my own regrets and the relentless memory of every moment that led me here. And yet, amid the crushing sorrow, a fragile ember of resolve began to glow. I realized that I could not change the past, but perhaps, in time, I might learn to accept the consequences. The journey ahead promised no redemption, no neat closure, only the slow, painful process of living with the choices I'd made. I knew that facing the abyss was the only way to truly see the person I had become, and maybe, one day, find a way to forgive myself. I used to believe that pain came in loud moments. Doors slammed, voices raised, tears shed in hallways. But real pain? It's quiet. It hums beneath your skin. It shows up when your phone stays silent. When you wake up and no one's lying next to you. When you walk through a grocery store and realize you don't know what cereal your daughter eats anymore. There's a photo of my kids on my fridge now. It's slightly crooked. I taped it up during the second week here, hoping it would remind me of why I needed to do better. Some days it works. Other days, it stares back like a judgment I'll never outlive. I see them every other weekend. Amy doesn't speak unless she has to. We exchange schedules like coworkers. Her eyes are tired. Not angry, just done. And that hurts worse. The kids, they're adjusting. My son still hesitates before hugging me. My daughter asks hard questions with soft voices. Why don't you live with mommy? Or, do you still love her? I answer carefully, always truthfully now, even when the truth scrapes something raw inside me. As for Olivia, the baby is due in 3 months. We've barely spoken. She sends medical updates. I send money. I told her I'll be there when the time comes. I don't know if I'll be a good father to this child. I wasn't even a good man to begin with. But I'll show up. That's what's left now, showing up. Even when you're broken. Even when there's no one clapping for you. Even when everything you cared about has either left or changed shape. People think a double life is exciting, forbidden, thrilling. They don't see the slow erosion of who you are. The rot that builds behind the smile. The moment you realize you're not living 2 lives. You're losing both. I don't expect anyone to forgive me. Not Amy. Not Olivia. Not my kids. But maybe someday, years from now, when I've kept enough promises, when I've stayed when it was hard, when I've answered every hard question without hiding. Maybe then, I'll sit in a quiet room, look in the mirror, and see someone worth being. Not a husband. Not a liar. Not a ghost. Just a man.